And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. As you can see, having a little eye problem here, a blocked gland. And so I am just putting on these shades here. I don't know what's more distracting here, John, the eye or the shades.
Kerry, you look extra cool today, I gotta
I'm
say.
cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guy who does like one of these red pill channels, and he wears shades. You don't even know his real name, and he does it from his car. I was thinking, I could actually do this from my car, and it would probably be okay, right?
Well, as much as you travel, you might as well set up to do podcasts from your car, because that would be really convenient.
It's easy.
Hmm.
It really is. Hey, the video, you can't be moving around for the video, obviously, because you can't be staring into the camera. But for audio, it's simple. So, hey, Bitcoin, man. Like, I've been a Bitcoin skeptic, but I've always been buying and selling it. Now I've been buying it more than I've been selling it, but it set another record again today. By the way, it's March 13th. We're doing Wednesday instead of Monday, and set another record, broke 73,000. I think the floodgates open up, John, when it hits 75,000, because such an emotional market with so many novice investors involved that when they see those round numbers, they go wild, just like 70,000.
Yeah, it can either be resistance or it can be the old resistance and the new support when something breaks through it. And yeah, Bitcoin, how many times has Bitcoin done this? It starts out low and then has an insane run, like, financial history size run. And then it corrects and then it does the same thing again. So it's progressed price wise in waves since its inception. And the waves have been orders of magnitude beyond the troughs that came previously. So it's an emerging asset class. I still don't know how it's going to play out, because we got at least two hurdles for Bitcoin to clear. First is the use case. It's got to start being actually used as money rather than a tradable asset. And at some point you're going to have to be able to afford to be money. You're going to have to go into Costco or something like that and be able to buy stuff. And I know that it's conceivable to do that now, but I mean normies, somebody like me has to be able to go into Costco.
You're a normie. You're not.
Yeah, well, as far as financial technology goes, when I learn how to do it, then most people will know how to do it. But the other hurdle is the bigger one, and that is, what will governments do when Bitcoin turns into a threat to national currencies? And what happens if they try to make it illegal, or will it turn out to be impossible for them to make it illegal? We'll see. But those are hurdles that have to be overcome. And in the meantime, there's plenty of money to be made for a Bitcoin bull just by riding this thing. We don't know where it's going to end up. Don't know whether it ends up being actual digital gold or just something that people made a ton of money on for a while. We'll see. But right now, good times for Bitcoin, guys. And a big part of the recent thing is all these Bitcoin ETFs.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like they're going to bring out an Ethereum ETF pretty soon here. And then the question becomes, how far down the food chain can you go with a crypto ETF? Are we going to have a Dogecoin fund pretty soon? And in this kind of a world, it's easy to laugh at that, and then it might actually turn out to be true, just because this is such a crazy financial world. So we'll see, but fun to watch.
Hey, so about those ETFs, I was skeptical at first because they're really ETPs, which are exchange traded products, which by its definition, if you look it up in Wikipedia, it implies that it's a tracking ETF, but which means that you really have to look at the documents to figure out whether your ETF is actually holding crypto or it's holding options and futures on crypto, in which case it's going to have time decay and everything else. And it's all in the documents, and to me, it's like they're going to hold physical Bitcoin, right? So just like the ETFs like GLD and SLV hold physical gold, right?
Well, in theory, the gold and silver ETFs do go out and actually buy physical, put it in a vault. Okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, I really don't know what the procedures are for these ETFs in Bitcoin, but the huge run that we're having now coincided with the launch of all these ETFs. So assuming there's a relationship there, it was clearly a positive relationship. And there's no reason to think that that if it's positive now, it will continue to be positive as long as there are capital inflows into these ETFs. If
Yeah.
the funds flows reverse, then presumably the relationship will be reversed. But we'll see for now.
It's all supply and demand, right? I mean, and Bitcoin is more supply, and Bitcoin is the perfect thing because there's no physical backing to it, right? There's no physical commodity. So it's strictly going to trade on supply and demand, which is going to be dramatically affected by emotions. And and then if you buy into the cycle argument, like Charles Nenner said, hey, this is the easiest cycle in the world to predict. I mean, I didn't see him predicting Bitcoin was going back from 17,000 to 73, but uh, in terms of short-term moves, really easy to predict. But the other thing is emotions are so transitory, kind of like our inflation here. They come and they go, and like you're happy in the morning, you're unhappy at lunchtime, and then you're happy again at dinner, and that could be influencing your trades on these cryptos. So my point is, they're super volatile because they trade purely on emotion combined with pure supply and pure demand.
Yeah, yeah. And again, as an emerging asset class, there's nothing really to hang your hat on. You can't come up with an intrinsic value for something that is basically a digital thing, a digital asset
Yeah.
that has no real, history of relating to anything in the physical world. So I'm sure there are trading systems that work with Bitcoin,
Oh yeah.
but
I
they
know.
aren't there. There aren't things like PE ratios or the gold silver ratio or any of the other
There's
things,
no
or
fundamentals.
interest
None.
rates relative to dividends. There's nothing like that. And if you assume that it ends up being money, then you've got to measure. You've got all the currency that's going to replace out there, and you can compare Bitcoin's market cap to the amount of currency in the world and get extremely undervalued. That would be the response if you're thinking of it as a replacement for gold at the center of the global financial system. And I think that's the rationale for a lot of Bitcoin maximalists. They see the endpoint where Bitcoin becomes the world's money, at which point it's worth $10 million per Bitcoin or whatever or more. So they don't care about the squiggles in the meantime. And we'll see. I am much more comfortable with precious metals because they're more understandable as a play on long-term monetary
Mm,
trends. And so far, so good with them. Gold is working out. It's basically doing what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to
yeah.
protect you from depreciation in the currency.
Okay.
And it's doing that just fine. You go back to wherever you want to go back to, and you get basically gold increasing more or less enough to offset inflation. So that's working out really well. Now, the question for gold and silver is, are we getting towards the end of a bull market, which is usually manic for precious metals? You get 2 or 3 years where people have decided that this is the new money. It's over for the fiat currencies, and we're just going to buy gold and silver as a replacement, and they pay any price. And so you get a parabolic straight up move. And it would be nice if this was the time for that. I don't know yet, but I think that time is coming. We're going to get another 1979 to 1980 or 2008 to 2011 kind of move here pretty soon, where precious metals just go parabolic. And
Mhm.
lately, we've been seeing hints that that might be conceivable now.
Hey, so I'm going to run a conspiracy theory by you because, we love to deconstruct conspiracy theories here. But what if the government's newfound respect, for lack of a better term, or acceptance of cryptocurrencies, as evidenced by the SEC approving all of these spot Bitcoin ETFs? What if that is just to further siphon money from precious metals into cryptos so they can kind of like help negate the canary in the coal mine or canary in the gold mine properties of precious metals? You think they would be this smart that they could think of this, John?
I've seen that theory out there. And basically, the theory goes that Bitcoin is an on-ramp for central bank digital currencies. In other words, you get people used to digital forms of money that maybe trade on a blockchain and get them comfortable with it, get a lot of their capital into it, and then you co-opt it. Or you make Bitcoin illegal and force people into FedCoin or whatever, and it's conceivable. Conceivable in the sense that it would fit that theory if that theory was real. And you can't put anything past the guys who are in charge of the global financial system and the military industrial complex. They would happily murder millions, literally, in order to end up being in charge of the world 10 years from now. And if that means tricking and then bankrupting huge numbers of today's Bitcoin aficionados, they would totally do it, and I don't think that's a high probability conspiracy theory, but I also don't think you can put anything past the guys that are basically trying to destroy the global financial system in order to take it over at some point. They're clearly trying to do that. So
Yeah. So the thought being that, if we assume that crypto is really help keep the precious metal prices down, right? Which I think there is an argument to be made for it, and certainly the junior mining sector. And we can get more people to put more money into crypto and ignore precious metals while us and our friends scoop them up for the eventual new world order or whatever it's going to be, then all of this kind of makes sense, right?
yeah, I mean an understandable strategy too. You suppress the price of gold while you vacuum it all up. Then you make private gold ownership illegal. And then you devalue all the world's currencies against gold, and you end up holding the valuable asset while everybody else is holding these increasingly worthless pieces of paper. Then you herd everybody into digital currencies that you use to control them, that are mainly means of control, not
Yeah.
actual financial instruments. Yeah, that's all possible. That's why, right? That's why we need to be owning as much physical gold and silver as possible and the means to defend them. Okay, so
Yes.
gold,
Survival
silver, and
tools.
lead. Yeah, yeah.
Ballistic precious metals, as we call them in the trade here. And
Mhm.
speaking of all these theories, one theory that isn't a theory, inflation came in hotter than expected. Not that you and I didn't expect it to, but that the economic experts who get paid six figures and seven figures for their pearls of wisdom were surprised. I mean, you could write these headlines: experts surprised by high inflation print, high inflation report. But who are these experts, and are they really surprised?
Well, it should read, experts are surprised that the government admits that inflation is higher than expected, because, they lie.
Yeah.
For the
Mhm.
past 20 or 30 years, they have lied about inflation regularly by using statistical tricks like hedonic adjustment and substitution. So they've suppressed the truth about the increase in the cost of living. But it's getting harder and harder to do that because people know what the cost of living is now.
Yeah.
We're all paying attention to what hamburger costs at Costco or Walmart or Kroger or whatever. And chicken and green bean, you name it, people who buy it and eat it regularly know how much it's up. And we're talking 20 or 30% in most cases. So it's not 2 or 3%. But even so, when the government admits that inflation is 3 or so percent, which they are admitting now, and the service side of inflation is actually higher than that, it's running at like 8%.
Correct.
And so when they admit that, at the same time, they're talking about cutting interest rates. What they're actually saying is that they're ready to capitulate, ready to give up on that 2% inflation target, and just go with whatever it turns out to be. So 2 or 2.5%, 3%, 4%, or whatever. They're going to start cutting interest rates pretty soon. Now, there's probably a lot of pressure there's pressure coming from 2 different directions. One is, three different directions. On the you got to cut interest rates side, there is a crisis brewing in commercial real estate that's going to spread to local and regional banks, which is going to be catastrophic. So you need to cut interest rates to make life easier for those banks so they don't all blow up at once. Second thing is it's an election year. The sitting government really wants lower interest rates heading into the election. And so that's a very big deal from the point of view of the Fed, because that's their Fed's employers. You know, the guys who own stock in the big banks, the guys who run American monetary policy, the guys who decide who gets invited to the dinners in Washington, D.C., all of them they all want lower interest rates, and the Fed knows that. So that's the pressure on lower interest rates. And then to keep rates higher, that pressure is coming from the fact that inflation really isn't dropping like a rock. You know, it's gradually, irregularly down, but it's kind of stalling right now at 3% and change official, which means 5 or 6 in reality. And for the Fed to start cutting interest rates in the face of inflation that is flat to rising into the 3s and 4s, that is a profound capitulation there. That is the Fed saying, you know what, we do not care about inflation anymore. Get rid of your dollars, because that's basically the signal that it sends when the government is explicitly inflating away your currency and not even pretending to care about price stability. You need to be out of that currency. So that's when you want a pile of silver coins so big that you can't even completely open the door to the room where they live, you know? And you know, we're heading for that time. So stackers out there, unless you're completely done, you may want to accelerate the process.
Hey, well, you know, one group of people who don't care about inflation are shoplifters, because they figured out a way to not have to worry about rising prices, and that ties in with defund the police. And Pittsburgh, you know, they're not going to respond to anything now but emergency calls during the day.
Well, okay, we'll get to the police. Let me address the shoplifter thing. I think they do care now, because inflation might push up their normal haul above the $900 level in California, and that would make it grand theft or whatever, you know, because now it's a misdemeanor. As long as you stay below that, they just cut you loose, you know. But if it gets above 900, then you risk some jail time, and so you know they're paying attention to inflation because that's their livelihood.
So their haul is
Now,
going down. They got
the thing,
more.
yeah. And now the thing with the cops is that first we had defund the police after the George Floyd.
I don't think we're going to
I
be
forgot we
censored.
weren't on Rumble. Yeah. Okay. But
Yeah.
so a lot of cities scaled back funding for the police, and at the same time started treating the police very disrespectfully. Other than the lower funding, they just behaved like defund the police was correct, and the police were the problem, not the criminals. So a lot of cops just don't feel like doing their job the way they used to feel like doing it. A lot of them are retiring or moving to places like Florida, where they're paying sign-up bonuses for cops and treating them very respectfully. So a lot of big cities, especially in the north, but also some in the south, like they're seeing dramatically decreased or increased response times. In New Orleans, it went from an already horrendous 55 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, when you call the cops, they show up 50 minutes later, to like 150 minutes. So, I mean, you might as well not even call the cops in that case. You either deal with it or it deals with you long before the cops get there. So, what's happening in a lot of cities is that this is becoming understood by people. And the cities are finding it impossible to hire enough new policemen to get to adequate staffing levels to where police response times are acceptable. And in Pittsburgh, like you said, they're not even showing up
Mm.
for nonviolent stuff. Like if it's not something that is in progress right that minute, they send you over to a place to leave a phone message. And so, Pittsburgh, that's a supposedly pretty functional city. It doesn't usually show up on the lists of, where San Francisco gets mentioned. Pittsburgh
No
is
way.
never in that discussion, but I guess it is now, if the cops literally aren't even showing up. And then in, the capital of Texas, come on, why am I not? Austin, I'm sorry, in
Often, yeah.
Austin. Yeah, Austin, which is in Texas, where you wouldn't think there would be issues. They had a part of the city where there was literally no police coverage for a stretch.
Right.
So they were so shorthanded that they just basically had to cut a section of the city loose.
Hmm.
And if you called them, I guess they would say, I'm sorry. There literally aren't any police that we can send to help you. But this is the kind of thing. I got a series on Substack called Welcome to the Third World that chronicles the process of us losing a lot of the things that we used to take for granted as Americans. And police response times are high on that list. We grew up, you and I, Kerry, grew up thinking that when you call the cops show up. And now that's not really the case anymore. They might eventually show up, or they might not show up at all, but they don't get there in time to deal with your life-threatening problem, right? So yeah, that's a huge change. And
Maybe, maybe they need an app.
yeah, well, no, okay, so combine. Oh yeah, so you see where the police car is coming, like police Uber or something like that.
Mm.
Of course, then you'd be watching
Or
it
a
on the screen.
vigilante app. How about a
Oh,
vigilante app? Like something's
yes.
happening, the
Yeah.
cops can't make it, so you just go online, get your app out and get a vigilante.
You know what? That's a hell of an idea for a private security company, right? You
Hmm.
just block off part of town and you say, all right, you call us.
$150 a call.
Yeah, you call us. We will be there in 5 minutes or less, or your visit is free. And you can look on the screen and see where the security guy is. That's legitimate. We keep coming up with great business ideas, Gary. You and I
Hey,
we should be entrepreneurs. Remember Handyman
Shark Tank.
University? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Handyman University, and you know, dial a vigilante. And we could put, like, for the logo, we'll put Charles Bronson's face up there with a gun, right?
Yeah,
Who is the best
yeah.
vigilante, Hollywood vigilante of all time, except going back to the Wild West. So, or it could have a Wild West type of theme, you know, hire a gunslinger.
Well, see, and that's where all the special forces soldiers would go after they get done with their
And
Iraq tours or
the
whatever.
cops
And
too.
yeah, and the cops who actually like their job could go do this and actually get to be involved in crime prevention. Yeah.
And you
So
could
you're
order
right.
5, you could order a platoon, you could specify whether they need to bring automatic weapons or not, and that would be another upcharge, and body armor and ambulance. Oh no, ambulance is probably services better
Yeah.
too.
And so you have a choice of a SWAT team instead of just a single cop or something like
Yeah,
that too. If you would
exactly.
just want to, yeah. Okay. Hey, they should extend that to the schools and for
Hmm.
homeschoolers and have dial a teacher. So if you're doing high level math and you're not sure you can teach it, you just hit the Uber and a math professor comes
Yeah,
and
at your
teaches your
door.
kids calculus. Yeah.
I
Okay, no,
love it.
that's part of the sharing economy that I think we can get behind,
The gig economy for vigilante,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that
Hey,
has such potential.
and
Yeah.
John, we set up Vigilante University too, so we can train these people so they know what to do and don't get into trouble when they show up on a scene, right?
Well, but I think the cops are currently training those same people. And then Uber for police will just hire them away, and
Yeah.
And then, if we're going to have imports or, mass immigration, we just hire a bunch of gangbangers and Russian special services, guys like that, bring them in. And there would be no shortage of
Yeah.
vigilantes.
I see. I think it's a booming market here. Somebody's going to do it, It's like, hey, who you going to call when the cops can't come? Who you going to call, right?
Is that what RoboCop was back in the
Kind of.
day? That
Yeah,
movie,
the
he was
cop
kind of
called
a
Ram.
vigilante,
Yeah,
right?
basically.
Or he was corporate. He was corporate security. And then the towns would contract with the corporate security companies to be their police force.
Yeah.
You could do that.
Remember that movie Rollerball with James Caan? Where corporations run the world, basically. And they have rollerball where people get killed. They're on roller skates going around a rink, but people get killed. They're killing each other. And that's how they use that to control the masses. And, kind of like the Colosseum and the gladiators, the modern day gladiators. If you haven't seen
Well,
that movie, I'm going to put it in the show notes. Rollerball with James Caan. It was a fabulous movie because he gets basically red pilled. He realizes he's part of the problem, and then he rebels against it. I won't tell anymore. I don't want to be a spoiler.
yeah, I don't like the idea of that nearly as much as
But that's what we
Uber
have.
for vigilantes.
Hey, so what about this TikTok ban? I think Trump said it. He's opposing it because he says it's one of the few free voices out there compared to the big tech oligarchy.
It's a tough one because it is part of the Chinese military apparatus, and they do
Out of
funnel all
mind.
the information. Yeah, so they take all their customer data and send it back to China's military. So and TikTok videos are addictive and destructive for kids. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's that side, and then the other side is that if the government is allowed to just cancel out social media companies, then Rumble is next,
Where does
right?
it stop?
And
Right?
Substack is after that. And I really don't want Substack. That's where I work. I don't want them to be taken over. But the government won't stop with TikTok once we set that precedent.
Oh, they'll stop at
Um,
nothing.
no. I mean, they're looking for ways to get rid of and Elon Musk too. They want to get
Oh,
rid
yeah.
of Twitter and Rumble because you take those two out of the equation and they're basically, the social media is basically controlled. It's basically a tame, censored ecosystem where nobody gets the truth. And we're so close to that right now. So we let it get a little bit further down that road, and the government will just feel free to take out anybody they want to, and anybody who thinks they might be stepping over the edge has to be careful. They'll have to self-censor.
Yeah. Hey, so speaking of this and speaking of Trump, it's obviously Trump against Biden. Maybe it's Trump and her against Biden. I mean, I don't know if you caught that guy's testimony, but you know, basically, if he was a doctor, they could have committed Biden on the basis of his testimony.
The thing is, that guy thinks he did the Democrats a favor by not indicting Biden, because he could have. I mean, in his statement, he said, "Yeah, Biden committed the following crimes, but I don't think we can. I don't think we can prosecute him because the jury would find him to be a well-intentioned older man with memory problems. In other words, a senile old guy who didn't know what he was doing." So instead, we're going to have him preside over our 3 or 4 proxy wars and potential World War III, instead of
Yeah, we're way better off.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
better off to have that old guy with the memory problems running World War III than
well, what about Kamala? That's our choice here at this point, right? You'd have to
that's
impeach both of them.
that's why Biden's still there. Hey, we're saying a lot of stuff that's going to get you banned, Kerry. I'm sorry. Feel free to edit this
You think so?
all these sections out. I don't know. You know better than me what's allowed, but we've said a lot of rude things in this, ruder than usual things. So I
I don't know.
understand
They
if you
don't
need to
seem
scale
to
it back.
care about this particular stuff, as long as we're not talking about global health issues, and you know what I mean by that, and conspiracies and blah blah blah. I'm willing to give it a shot and let's see what happens.
Yeah, because okay, we pushed the envelope a little bit. Let's
I
see
got a couple
where
of
the edge is.
points.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I got to, I don't know. I have to think about this. Well, hey, so finally, our last issue here, and is, well, I don't know what we can talk about anymore, but hey, what about Atlanta? What's happening with the case against Trump there? And it's turned into a total circus. And this is part of what they call lawfare, where the legal establishment bands together to take out an opponent, but it's not having its desired effect on President 45, is it?
Well, you know what? Trump is touched by an angel somehow because he has the luck of somebody where there's supernatural intervention. Because okay, the Democrats have, they've drummed up how many? 5 or 6 basically false um, indictments against Trump on like 95 counts, and there's court cases everywhere you look. And the one in Atlanta was actually the most dangerous. But it turned out the people they picked to be in charge of the prosecution turned out to be so hopelessly corrupt and incompetent that they're just melting down. We don't even,
And
everybody
stupid.
knows the details. Yeah.
You could also
But
say stupid.
okay, stupid too, but they're melting down on such a scale that this thing that might have landed Trump in prison probably isn't even going to go to trial before the election, after which he just he just closes it down. And there's that. And then there's the fact that they thought these trials would be debilitating for Trump politically because he'd have to spend all his time in court. But it turns out that's the best campaigning he can do. He goes, sits in court for a couple hours, goes out to the steps of the courthouse where the whole world's news is waiting for him. And then he makes a campaign statement about how he's being persecuted.
Brilliant.
And that's broadcast around the world. And, every time he does that, a new 100 or so thousand middle of the road voters see it and go, wow, they are kind of persecuting that guy. That's not really fair what they're doing. I might have to vote for him this time. So he's snarfing up middle of the road voters here who might not have been Trump voters just because the illegality, well, not illegality, but unfairness of what you called lawfare, in other words, weaponizing the criminal justice system to get a political opponent, is so blatant. And a new set of people see it every time he goes out on a courthouse steps and starts talking about it. So it turned out to be that is solid gold publicity, right? You can't pay for that kind of publicity because the whole world is showing up to see him every single time he steps out of a courthouse. So yeah, and that's another lucky break that the Democrats were dumb enough to try to do it this way, because I don't think he'd get nearly the publicity in this campaign that he's getting now. And
Couldn't
it's
agree with you
free. He
more.
doesn't have to pay for it. Yeah.
It's brilliant. And he's making them all look bad. Personally, I thought he should have fired all his attorneys and just represented himself in court. Because then you can basically say anything you want in court, and there's nothing they can do to stop you, other than restraining you.
Yeah, because I mean, he is losing all his cases, but they're all going to be overturned. I mean, that New York State case, where they convicted him of behaving like a real estate developer, so all the other real estate developers like, oh, is this illegal? What I do every day, is it illegal? And so that's going to get overturned because there was no victim, nobody actually suffered a loss. And so that's done. And then this one where the crazy woman 30 years later is funded by a Democrat mega donor to make an accusation against Trump where there's no witness. There's absolutely no evidence of any kind of a crime this late, this many decades afterwards. And they even change the statute of limitations law just for this one case.
Mhm.
And so that's almost certainly going to be overturned, at least in magnitude. You know, he won't end up having to pay $90 million or anything. They'll probably, I mean, a rational jury would scale it back to $2 or something like that if they wanted to convict Trump of something. You know, there wouldn't be any monetary damages. Anyhow, it's all working out in his favor right now. Um, you know, that leads us to darker scenarios, which we don't
Yeah.
need to go to. Like,
Well,
what's the
that we
power
will.
structure going to do now? Yeah,
Hey,
they still
well,
haven't given Kennedy Secret Service protection, right?
no, no, and the Secretary of Homeland Security personally denied his protection after he's had several attempts, and he's a Kennedy, and everything else. So, and he's going to be in the no label party, evidently, right? We should talk
No,
about
I didn't
that.
hear that. Is that
The
right?
Yeah, the no name party. So, well, I think we're out of time. We'll get to the no name party, no label party next time. 2024 is shaping up to be really interesting, like nothing we ever saw. Make sure you go over to John's Substack, rubino.substack.com. Sign up for his newsletter. The articles come fast and furious, and you're not going to want to miss them. They're cutting edge info, insights, and perspectives that you're just not going to find anywhere else but from John Rubino. And of course, the link is in the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. John, we will talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thanks. And
Thanks, Kerry.
hopefully, I'll be sans sunglasses.
I don't know. This might be the start of something, Kerry. When all your audience says you look better this way,
Yeah, well, it's
because
probably true,
you're
and
a
I
cool
wouldn't.
guy now. Yeah,
I'd never doubt the wisdom of the audience. All
there you
right,
go.
be
All
well.
right. See ya.